Hey everyone, and welcome back to our Get Started Fast with Avid Media Composer 7 tutorial series presented by Avid Blogs. My name is Kevin P McAuliffe and we are at lesson 3, and in this lesson we're going to take a look specifically at editing. Okay, not a long introduction here, let's just get into Media Composer and let's get started. Okay, so now it's time to talk about what you've all been waiting for, and that is of course editing, but also we're going to keep in mind staying organized while we're working. Okay, so obviously to edit we're going to need some footage to work with, and I do have some footage here from Digital Juice's Video Tracks HD. Again, it's our motocross footage. All this footage was AMA linked to, so I didn't actually import anything. And let's just create a very basic timeline. What we're going to do is we're going to start with a clip. So what I'm going to do is just simply double click on any clip here. And obviously you'll see that I already have some in and out points marked on this clip. But if I wanted to add my own in and out points at any time, it's actually very easy. All you're going to do is use the I for in and O for out keys on your keyboard. Now I could say to come back and you can use the mark in, and you can come down and use the mark out buttons up here on the composer window, but right now we're all about getting you as quick as you can possibly be in Media Composer, and using the keyboard with your left hand and the mouse with your right hand is how you're going to become a quick and proficient editor. So that's what we're going to be doing. I'm going to be giving you all the keyboard shortcuts to get you up to speed. Okay. So now that we have an in and out point marked on this clip, we need to drop it into a timeline. Now I could create a new sequence right over here by simply right click and saying new sequence, or by simply hitting the edit button and dropping this clip into nothing. Media Composer is going to create a new timeline for me. Now of course that timeline is going to be the exact parameters that we set up when we initially created this project, 720p 23976. So what I'm going to do in this case is I'm going to hit B on the keyboard on both Mac and Windows. B is the shortcut for the overwrite edit, so I'm just going to drop it in just like such. And let's get another clip and drop it in again. Just double click, and I'm going to mark an in and out point here. Again, I on the keyboard to mark an in point, O on the keyboard to mark an out point, again B on the keyboard to drop this clip into my timeline. Now I used B, which is the overwrite edit command, for those last two edits, but let's talk a little bit about what the overwrite command does. So let's pick a different clip here. I'm just going to choose this clip right here, and I'm just going to choose a very small portion of it right when our motocross guy goes past the camera right there. And what I want to do is I want to take this clip and I want to put it in between these two shots. Now you'll remember that we were using the B key, the overwrite key, to drop that in. The only problem with the overwrite command is that it's going to do just what it sounds. It's going to take this footage and it's going to overwrite it. It's going to place it on right on top of this shot right here. You'll see that if I hit B on the keyboard to drop it in, it doesn't overwrite. It writes right over top of the footage that was there. And in this case, I wanted to push the footage down. I wanted to insert this footage into my timeline. So I'm just going to undo what I just did by simply hitting Command and Z on the Mac, Control and Z for all my Windows friends out there. And what we're going to do, instead of using the B key, which is the overwrite command, we're going to use the V key, which is the insert command. Now I also want to point out that you can find those shortcuts right here, overwrite, and of course insert. So what we're going to do is we're going to take our clip right here, and I'm simply going to hit V on the keyboard on both Mac and Windows to insert this clip, and you'll see what happened was that this shot basically took this shot and pushed it down the timeline and inserted itself right before it. Now let's take a clip and let's put it on video channel 2. What I'm going to do is simply hit Command and Y on the Mac, Control and Y on Windows, and let's edit a clip onto V2. So what we're going to do is, again, we're just going to come back to our bin, and I'm just going to grab any clip. Sure, I've already got the in and out points marked on this clip. Now what we want to do is we want to just deselect the audio, because obviously we've got nothing on the audio channel, so we don't need to worry about that right now. And what I want to do is I want to take this channel and I want to patch it into V2. So we're going to take V1 and patch it into V2. Now there's a couple ways that we can do this. The easiest way to do it in the case that I have set up right now is for me to simply deselect V1. By doing that, I'm going to auto patch into V2. Now this is actually a setting that's turned on by default. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to navigate over to my settings. We're going to come all the way down to the bottom to my timeline settings here. I'm simply going to double click on it, and you're going to see that we have right over here in the edit tab right here, auto patching, and of course auto monitoring set right here. So if for some reason your timeline isn't auto patching like I just did, you can simply turn it on, or of course turn it off right here. So now that I'm up on V2, what I can do is just take this clip, mark an in point anywhere that I want it to go, and I can either overwrite or insert this clip into my timeline. So all I'm going to do is just basically hit B on the keyboard and drop that in. Now, of course, because I'm monitoring the highest layer here, you'll see this is my source toggle here that will let me decide what layer I want to view. Right now, I'm obviously on V2. I could move that down to V1 if I wanted to, but obviously in most cases, you're going to be viewing from the highest layer all the way down to the bottommost layer. So all I'm going to do is simply hit the spacebar to play this now, and you're going to see that this is going to edit in just like any clip would on V1. Very nice. Now, why would you want to work like this? Well, to be perfectly honest, the great thing about Media Composer is that it's so flexible. You can really work however you want. I've seen some editors who like to add edits and add shots into multiple video layers. You can set your timeline up however you want. Okay, so let's add some audio elements to our timeline. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to come back to my bins here. I'm just going to twirl down audio, and let's just go into voiceovers, and I'm just going to import an audio track here. And I'm going to come to my Mac drive, and I'm going to come to my footage, and I do have an audio folder called music. I have a folder called sample VO, and I'm just going to import this element here. It's just, again, fairly straightforward to sample VO. This is some very cool motocross footage that we have in our timeline. And you can hear it's just basically a sample of me talking that we're going to use in our timeline. Now you'll see that I actually have 2 channels of this VO track, which I actually only need 1 because it's going to be mono. So I'm just going to drop 1 channel in, but I do need 3 audio channels. I do need to have 2 music channels and the 1 voiceover channel. 2 music channels obviously for stereo left and stereo right. So I'm going to add a new audio track by simply hitting Command and U on the Mac, Control and U for all my Windows friends out there. And I'm just going to take this VO and drop it in right about here, I think, on V3. Now you'll see again, auto patching, because I didn't have any other channels turned on. If I wanted to, for example, switch to A1, all I have to do is deselect A3, and you can see how the auto patching works. Now I should mention the fact that before, when I did the auto patching, I was going to tell you the other way to do this, and it's actually very simple. You can grab A1 and just drag it right up here to A1 or to A2 or to A3, which is the other way to patch one channel into another. The same works for audio and for video. Okay, so I'm going to take this clip and I'm just going to drop it into my timeline. I do need to select the entire clip first. I'm just going to drop it in like such. Now, if I wanted to see the audio waveforms for this clip, it's very easy to set up. Most people like to see that when they're working. What I'm going to do is just navigate down to the fast menu. I'm going to come up to audio data and I'm simply going to say show waveform, and there we go. Now, I do need an audio track as well, or a music track. What I'm going to do is simply say import. Let's step up. Let's come into the streets. This is from Rampant Design Tools, and I'm simply going to select the 30-second piece of music. I'm going to say open. It's a broadcast wave file, so we'll just set it to be 2398. I'll simply say OK to all. You'll see in a couple seconds we now have this audio clip ready to work with. So I'm just going to take it. Again, it's 2 channels. So we're just going to patch A1 into A1, and we're going to patch A2 into A2. And let's just hit T on the keyboard. Now, T is the shortcut to mark a duration. You'll see just like that. Now, if I had an edit in here, it would only mark up to the point where that edit was. All I'm going to do now is simply hit B on the keyboard, and I now have a music channel and my voiceover channel. But you'll hear that if I play it back, it's all just a loud, garbled mess. You can hear this is way too loud. I can barely hear the voiceover. And we really need to get in and do a mix to this. Okay, so let's do that. First of all, you'll see that the audio is way too loud. Now you can see that I have my VU meters right here, but I usually like to use the audio tool, and the shortcut for the audio tool is Command and 1 or Control and 1 for all of my Windows friends out there. Now you can also find the audio tool right up here in the tools menu, located right here, audio tool. And what I want to do first of all is I want to lower this down. Now normally -10 is the peak that I go to as far as my audio goes to. So I do need another tool to adjust my audio. And of course I'm talking about the audio mixer. Now a couple ways that you can access the audio mixer. You can navigate up to the tools drop down and you can see audio mixer right here. There is no shortcut for it, but I do have a shortcut for it on my keyboard because I have it mapped to my keyboard simply as F3. Now let's just bring the audio mixer right over here into the middle just so that you can see what's happening with it. Now right now you're going to see that if I come back to A1 and A2, my audio channels are muted. So what is going on with that? Well, we actually have another setting that we need to adjust that's causing this. And what we're going to do is we're going to navigate over here to settings. I'm going to come all the way up to the top here, and I'm going to come into the audio settings, and you'll see right now that the default pan for the mono tracks is set to centered. I want it to be alternating left and right. Now you'll see that I have a left channel and a right channel. Very cool. Okay, now you're also going to notice that I only have 2 channels of audio appearing in the tool. I do have my master fader that obviously adjusts an entire mix that you have done, but right now I seemingly can only adjust audio 1 and audio 2. Well, I wonder why that is. Well, the reason that is because I'm just not over top of audio channel 3. You'll see as soon as I move over top of it, now I have access to it in the mixer. Okay, so the first thing I know that I want to do is I want to adjust my music so that it's down at -10. Well, I know it was peaking at 0, so I should be able to just lower this down to -10 and I should be all set to go. Now, of course, there's a couple ways to do that. I can adjust each track individually, but if I want to adjust tracks together, let's say I want to adjust, audio track 1, audio track 2, and audio track 10, I can simply group them together right up here. And since I know that this is a stereo pair, in most cases I'm going to be adjusting both channels together. So now I can simply grab the fader and adjust it however I want. Or since I know exactly what I want to go down to, I'm simply going to punch in -10, and there we go. Now you'll see that if I come back to the beginning here, I can simply hit play on the keyboard, and our audio peaks at about -10. This is some very cool motocross footage. Okay, now let's talk about this voiceover track that of course now is only on the left channel. You'll see that I can come over here and solo that channel and hit play. This is some very cool motocross. And there it is, only coming out of the left channel. So how do we adjust that? Well, you'll see that we have our pan tool right here. Now most people are going to get in and try to adjust it by grabbing it and dragging it, trying to get it up to center, and you don't really have to do that. All you need to do is simply hold Option on the Mac, Alt on Windows, and click on it, and it's going to mid that channel for you. And now if I come back and hit play, this is some very cool motocross footage that we have in our timeline. Now, I'm going to show you a very simple way to do an audio mix inside of Media Composer, and I'm going to explain why I do it this way in just a second. The easiest way for me to do an audio mix inside of Media Composer is to simply select the 2 channels that I want to adjust the audio to, and for right now what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn my audio waveforms off. Now, believe it or not, in my settings, right up here in my Composer window, I actually have the waveform set as a shortcut. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to come to right about here, and I'm going to add an edit to that clip. So to add the edit, very simple. All I'm going to do is simply come right up here to the top of my timeline, and I'm simply going to add an edit just like that. Of course, you can map that shortcut to your keyboard. I'm going to come right down here and do the exact same thing. Let's just add an edit. Now I'm going to take this section of the audio and simply lower it down to, let's say, about -18. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to step ahead a little bit. We're actually going to give you a little bit of a preview of a lesson coming up about effects. And what we're going to do is we're going to mark an in and out point around these clips here. Now I call them clips because essentially by adding the edit we've created 3 individual clips, and I'm going to hit the / key to call up the quick transition window. Now we're going to get more into this window in a later lesson, but for right now all I'm going to do is I'm going to say apply to all transitions into out, and I'm going to add some dissolves in here. And what I have now, if I come back and I unsolo this channel and I hit play, this is some very cool motocross footage that we have in our timeline. You see that we have a very cool audio mix done very easily. Now the question is, why would I go in and do this? Well, the reason that I edit like this, especially if I'm working on longer timelines, is because if an editor needs to get in and make a quick audio adjustment, this is a very visual way to do your audio mixing. I didn't use the keyframing method, which we'll talk about in later lessons. Doing it this way, an editor can step in and see the music mix, make an adjustment right away, whether it's an editor or even an audio engineer working in Pro Tools. Okay, so let's talk about adjusting these clips in my timeline. And what I'm going to do for the purposes of our workflow is I'm just going to put this clip down on V1 just so we have everything together. And what I want to do is I want to adjust where this edit happens, because you see my motocross guy doesn't leave the frame like I want him to. And I need him to leave that frame. So there's a couple ways that I can do this. The first method is trim mode. What I'm going to do is I'm going to select V1 where all my clips are, and I'm going to access trim mode by simply hitting U on the keyboard. Once I hit U on the keyboard, let's just close the audio mixer here. You're going to see we have a little bit of a different setup here. You'll see that we can take a look at the outgoing shot, the last frame of the outgoing shot, and the first frame of the incoming shot. Now if I wanted to adjust this so that my motocross guy leaves the frame completely, there's a couple ways I can do it. I can simply come down and adjust the trim right by 1 frame, or by 8 frames. Now what's important to keep in mind is that the reason that it's 8 frames is we're actually working in thirds of a second. So because we're dealing with a 24 frame per second timeline, that's why it's 8 frames. If you're working in 30 frames per second, this would be an adjustment of 10 frames. So this would be trim right 10 frames. And all I have to do now is basically just click down, and you'll see that as I'm adjusting the clips, it's actually being adjusted down here in my timeline as well. There we go. And you'll see now my motocross guy leaves the frame. Now for me to step back out into edit mode, I'm simply going to press Y on the keyboard, or of course you can come right back down here to source record mode. And now I can play this. This is some very cool motor. And there we go. My motocross guy leaves the frame. Now I'm just going to mute my audio just for the purposes of what we're doing here, just so that I don't have to hear it. But you'll see, getting in and adjusting the trim is very simple. Now, what's important to keep in mind is that what I was doing in that trim was adjusting the outgoing head and the incoming head at the same time. So basically, no adjustments were made to the length of my timeline. Everything was done right from within these two clips, because I actually have it set up so that I'm adjusting both in and out points. But if I wanted to, and I'm just going to undo what I just did, I could adjust just the outgoing frame here by simply clicking on it. By clicking on it, you're going to notice now that I'm adjusting only the outgoing frame, and as I adjust by trimming right 1 frame to have my motocross rider leave the frame, what's going to happen is all of the clips of my timeline are going to be pushed down past the end of the timeline. We've basically added these frames in instead of just adjusting them in between the two shots. I'm just going to undo what I just did. Now, of course, we could do the exact same thing with the incoming frame here. If I wanted to push this down a little bit, we could actually adjust this. So let's say I didn't want to have him on the frame here. I can just adjust this like such. And by doing it with just the incoming head, it's again going to push everything down the other way to make that adjustment. You'll see now that I can come back and hit play. This is some very cool. Of course, I wanted to have those channels muted here, so let's mute those again. There we go. So you'll see a very important technique to keep in mind. I'll just again undo what I just did. I would probably say that in most cases I do about 75% of my trimming adjusting the incoming and outgoing heads of the shots, and it's very rare that I'm pushing stuff down my timeline. Occasionally it happens, but like I said, in most cases it's simply adjusting, where an edit is actually going to happen by a few frames. Now, there's one other quick one that I want to show you here as far as trimming, and that is the extend key. I love the extend key. The extend key I use all the time. And the extend command is very simple to do. Let's just say I wanted to extend the shot down. Let's say client came in and said, you know what, I want that to be extended, that shot extended down another, 15 frames. So what I'm going to do is I'm simply going to hit plus 15, and I'm going to mark an out point right there. I'm going to remove the in point by hitting D on the keyboard. Now, most people would think that I would come into trim mode and I would grab it and drag it down, but I actually have this as a shortcut. It's right now, it's on my composer window, but in most cases I have it on my keyboard, and it's right here. It's the extend command. And the extend command is very simple. It extends a shot from wherever the edit is to the in or out point that you have set simply by clicking on the button, just like that. And of course it works the other way as well. I could simply mark an in point here. I'm just going to remove the out point and hit extend. And you can see the extend command is a fantastic tool to have at your disposal. And the extend command, I can easily see myself using 100 times in an hour when I'm doing an edit to make quick adjustments that I don't normally want to go into trim mode to do. Okay, so next, let's talk about creating a basic title. To create a basic title, very simple. We're going to navigate up to clip, and I'm going to come down to new title. Once I call up the new title, you'll see that I'm going to be asked which title tool I want to use. Now, for the purposes of what we're doing, we're just going to use the standard title tool. Once I call up the standard title tool, you'll now see that I can come in, and with the text tool selected, I can just type in, let's type in my name. I'm going to be Kevin P McAuliffe, and I'm going to be a motocross master. And of course I can, with the selection tool, move my text wherever I want it to go. I have complete control over the kerning, the leading, the text size, whether it's bold or italicized. And of course I can add whatever font that I want. Let's just pick a little bit of a bolder font here. Let's see, why not we choose Helvetica here? Very nice. I'll just place it down here. And of course we also have the ability to get in and add drop shadows to our text as well. And adding drop shadows to your text is very simple. All you need to do is simply navigate down to the shadow depth selection window, punch in how deep you want the shadow to be, simply hit enter, and you'll be all set to go. Now, of course, I only have it set to be 2 now, but what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to soften the shadow by simply pressing Command Shift and H, Control Shift and H for all my Windows friends out there, and we're just going to soften the shadow to a softness of 4. I'm simply going to say apply, and you'll see that we now have a very nice soft shadow. that really looks very nice over top of our footage. Of course, we also have the complete ability to get in and adjust the color of the font to be whatever we want it to be. Now, of course, red is normally not the best color to pick. I always try to pick a lighter color. Even this blue is a very nice color. I can also get in and adjust the color of the shadow, the border, and I have the ability to get in and add transparencies in here as well. Now, this is the basic title tool. This is where you're going to get in and just do standard title tools. To be perfectly honest, I probably use the basic title tool for about 95% of the titles I do. We're going to talk about the marquee title tool in a later lesson. But now, if I was happy with this title, all I need to do is simply come up, close it, and I can save this. We're just going to put it into we'll just put it into the voiceovers bin because I have that open right now. We're going to call this Kevin P McAuliffe. Now, of course, I need to save this, and what I also want to do is just put it into my graphics folder here. There we go. We'll just close voiceovers here. Now, of course, to edit this into my timeline, we edit it just like we would edit anything else. What I'm going to do is we're not going to make it too long here. I'll just put it down to about 6 seconds. And remember, we're going to auto patch into V2 by simply turning off V1. I'm going to mark an in point, and because I am on V2 and there's nothing else on V2, I can simply use overwrite or insert. We'll use overwrite to drop this into my timeline. Now, of course, if I come back and press play, we've got some music, we got a little bit of a mix. This is some we've got a cool title that comes in that we have in our timeline. Of course, music fades back up, title cuts out, and there we go. Now, there's one more quick shortcut that I want to introduce you to, and it's a fantastic shortcut that, especially if you do a lot of titling or effects work, you're definitely going to want to have at your disposal. And for it, I'm going to open up the command palette. I'm going to come up to Tools, we'll come down to Command Palette, and I'm going to come into the Effects section right here. Now, the command that I'm talking about is located right here. It's called Fade Effect. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to make the command palette the active palette for right now. And what we want to do is we want to fade this title in. I'm just going to give it a fade in of 8 frames and a fade out of 8 frames. Now, all I have to do is simply come up and say Fade Effect. I'm going to be prompted as to how long do I want the fade in to be, 8 frames. How long do I want the fade out to be, 8 frames. And as soon as I say OK, I'm just going to mute my audio here. I'm going to come back and press play, and we now have a fade in of my title. And it'll get to the end, and it will fade out as well. Now remember, this is not called fade title, it's called fade effect. So essentially any effect you have, whether it's a picture-in-picture, a 3D warp, anything that you might have that's an effect in your timeline, you can use fade effect to fade it in and fade it out. Okay, now before I wrap this lesson up, I do want to talk about setting up things properly in your timeline, especially if you're going to be setting your timelines to post audio. So my piece of advice when working with audio in your timeline, in most cases, on average, you're going to probably be dealing with about 6 to 8 channels of audio. So here's how I want you to lay things out. I want you to have narration on channel 1 and 2, on-camera dialogue on 3 and 4, music on 5 and 6, and sound effects on 7 and 8. Now the reason that I have things laid out like that is actually for one very simple reason. Reason being is that, being a senior editor, I have a lot of editors, standard editors and junior editors that are calling me all the time saying, I can't find this audio element or I can't find that audio element. And the first thing that I say to them is, okay, well, what is it that you're looking for? Oh, okay, you're looking for a voiceover. Well, chances are the voiceover is going to be on either channel 1 or 2. Now, I know that that's mono, so, maybe there was a point where we had, 2 voiceovers starting to slightly cross each other, so I had to sort of double them up on channels, but I can pretty much tell them with almost certainty where that voiceover is going to be. If I have an audio engineer calling me saying, Kev, I'm really looking for the on-camera dialogue tracks. Where would I find those? You know what? They're on 3 and 4. So you see, by always putting things on the same channel, you're setting yourself up for success, because if anybody ever calls you with an issue, you're going to be able to resolve it quick and simple. So if you want to get post-production workflow tutorials and industry insight that you need to bring great stories to life, head on over to avidblogs.com/post.